Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. I hope you had a wonderful day. I know it's gotten late, a little bit of a busy day here, but super excited to be here with you. And we're kicking off a brand new series. I announced it a little bit earlier on here on our Facebook page, also on our Instagram and everywhere. That we're going to be doing this a weekly series called Mindset Mondays. So, why are we doing this? One of the most common things that CPA candidates, students, even experienced professionals who are about to take on the CPA exam for the first time, one of the most common questions that I get asked is, what strategy for passing the exam is most effective? What are some of the ways that I can increase my chances of passing the exam on the first try, decrease my chances of failing an exam, and make sure I get through this as quickly as possible? And the challenging thing about that, though, is that there are so many different strategies, so many different approaches that have worked for other people and that could potentially work for you. The challenge is that they don't work for everybody. And there's a whole lot of those strategies out there on the market, available for free, all sorts of experts sharing what worked for them to pass the exam, what may have worked for their clients. But again, for example, the approach of only studying multiple choice questions and doing hundreds, if not thousands, of multiple choice questions, 100% that has worked for somebody. It has helped someone become a CPA, and that's fantastic. But it may not be the strategy that works for you. So it's a really challenging question to answer. But in my years of working with CPA candidates and specifically people who have struggled to pass the exam, one thing is completely universal when it comes to being effective and passing the exam, being successful in this journey, and that is mindset. If your mindset is in a great place, it every single time without fail, that will help you perform better on the exam. It will increase your scores. And the flip side of that is if you go into an exam, into a study session, if you're going into this CPA exam journey with a mindset that is not strong or that is negative or disempowering, it absolutely will cost you points on the exam. So I just want to take a step back from this for a moment and we can dive into a bit more about what mindset is, what I mean when I say that your mindset matters. But that's the reason, that was sort of where this idea was born, that's the only universal thing that is true about every CPA candidate who is successful and just about every CPA candidate who is not successful. The mindset is a factor. Yes, you've got to study, you've got to understand the technical content of the exam. There's all sorts of other factors that play too, but this is the guarantee that if your mindset is not in a good place, you are absolutely leaving points on the table from day one. And it could clear, that's sort of if we're being nice about it, right? If you've got a poor mindset or a disempowered mindset, you might be leaving a few points on the table. The flip side of that is you could be completely self-sabotaging your journey. You could have no chance of passing this exam, depending on where your mindset is, what that conversation is that you're having with yourself internally. It could be completely holding you back and making it impossible for you to pass the exam. That's sort of a worst case scenario. Meanwhile, you're still out here investing hours, hundreds of dollars on all of these retakes and application fees, all sorts of time, saying no to family and friends, but your mindset is the thing that's holding you back. So this is why we've created as a weekly series, because this is a big time conversation. And what your mindset might be is very different from what anybody else watching this video's mindset may be. There are all sorts of things for us to unpack. So we're going to be doing that weekly, tackling individual, very specific issues each Monday. And we'll also be bringing on some special guests, some of my former clients, people who have overcome some of their mindset issues. They'll be joining us to share their stories about where their mindset was originally and what they had to do to shift it and what that shift was that helped them to eventually be successful with the exam. So super excited. But for today, I just wanted to lay the foundation. Because again, not everybody is talking about mindset. Not everyone is often in a conversation about their mindset. So I thought it would help to just get started at the basics. So what is a mindset? It is the set of values, it's your set of beliefs and your attitudes that are held by an individual. Now, these could be something that you were maybe raised on, beliefs that were family beliefs, something that was passed on to you by your parents or other people that were formative in your life. It's also something that you could pick up from your own personal experiences and just be held internally. But eventually, these ideas become our habits, and they have been developed over time. One of the best examples that I heard of, I actually heard from Marshall Goldsmith, who's a wonderful executive coach, and I heard him speak a few years ago, and he told this story about how I believe his dad owned a gas station or was a mechanic of some kind. And so when he was born, his mom was very dead set that he would go and do bigger and better things with his life. She didn't want her son to go and eventually work in the mechanic business. And so what she started to tell him was that he was not mechanically inclined. And over time, he started to take that idea on board, and he developed this mindset that said, I am not mechanically inclined. So I'm not going to be able to go work in the family business, in the mechanic shop. I don't have that skill set. That may or may not have been true, because the fact of the matter was he hadn't necessarily ever tried to, dabble in mechanical things. He had never tried to fix a car. He had never done any of those things. But this idea that was planted by someone else became a mindset, and almost a fixed mindset, something that he didn't feel he could necessarily change until at one day he realized, like, wow, I've actually never tried it. Maybe I am. Maybe I am good at mechanic type things. Maybe I could fix a car if I tried it. So that's one example of a mindset. And so what's interesting about our mindsets is that it can eventually create a blind spot, like what happened in his example. He had this blind spot that says, I'm actually not good at mechanical things. I can't do that. And he was operating on that when the reality was maybe he could have been good at those things. But it created this blind spot, this limiting belief about himself and his ability to operate in a certain way in his life. So those blind spots then become ways where we hold ourselves back, sometimes without even knowing that we're doing it. A lot of the time, our mindsets are just operating in the background. They are operating in our subconscious. And if we don't become aware of them, it makes it very difficult to change them. But it has us almost taking, again, your mindset has you able to take certain action very freely and without thinking about it, without worrying about it too much. On the flip side, it could have you really resistant to taking other action. Here's an example. A mindset could be that money is the root of all evil. That's something that I read about in a lot of financial, wealth building books. They talk about that a lot. It's a common sort of family story about money. And if that was one that happened in your family, you may have taken that on for yourself, something that they had taught you as you were growing up. So money is the root of all evil. Now, if that's my mindset, and then I'm out here trying to make money, you could see there could be some conflict there, right? As a result of that mindset, whether you're aware of it, consciously aware of it or not, then that person might go and find themselves always broke. When they do have money, they might squander it. They might waste it on something. They might lose it. I have known people to literally have $100 in their wallet. Next thing you know, it's gone. And it's all tied to that money mindset. Because if I truly believe deep down that money is the root of all evil, I don't actually want that, right? I don't want money. I don't want to be considered or consider myself to be evil. So that's, again, another example of where the mindset could have, could really start to impact the type of action you're taking. Similarly, it could hold you back from doing different things if you believe, for example, with the CPA exam, that this is going to be awful. This is going to be the most miserable experience ever. It may be throwing up resistance to having you even get started in the journey towards the CPA. If you've already decided, if your mindset has decided that this is going to be terrible. So there are two different types of mindsets that I think it would be helpful to throw out there for you also. One is a fixed mindset, and the other is a growth mindset. If you were to Google it, there's all sorts of articles that go into great detail about this. But a fixed mindset is one, as the name suggests, that is pretty definitive. An example would be, I'm good at economics, or I'm not good at financial accounting. I'm not a good test taker. I've always been told that I wouldn't make a good accountant, or I've always been told that I'd make a great attorney. Those are sorts of things that can, again, they could be developed internally from you over time, or be ideas that somebody else has planted, this little seed that's been planted in your mind. That's a fixed mindset. It almost suggests that there's no way for you to fix it, that it just is what it is. It's something you have to deal with. I'm not good at this, period. The other side of that, though, is a growth mindset. Someone with a growth mindset is more open to trying things, open to exploring. They may see failures or setbacks as part of the learning and development process, as opposed to seeing them as complete failures and proof that, in fact, they're not good test takers. So an example of how that could play out, I've had clients that have said, I'm not a good standardized test taker. That's a fixed mindset. But if we are able to shift that into more of an open, more growth mindset orientation, then they may say, okay, I'm going to map out my study plan, I'm going to apply myself as much as I possibly can, really be dedicated, try to figure out a plan that works for me. And if I fail, that may be part of the process, right? Any setbacks I experience are part of the process, but it's all getting me closer to my end goal, that final result of becoming a CPA. Whereas if I stay with that fixed mindset and say, I'm just not a good standardized test taker, there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm never going to be able to pass the CPA exam, it's done its job then, right? It has held you back, successfully held you back from even attempting this exam. So it's important that we are, first of all, able to identify what those mindsets are that we operate with, and we all have hundreds of them. They can be sort of specific to different areas of our life, like the money example I gave you. They could be just general about, I'm too old to learn new things, or I'm too far in my career to come back and get licensed as a CPA. Whatever those stories are, they can be very specific. They could also be pretty general. But we need to first identify what they are, because we can't change something that we're not clear about. And then the goal is to shift into a growth mindset, one that has different things become available to you. And the key thing about this is that any mindset can be changed, even if it is fixed, even if it's something that has been true in your family or has been the family mantra for generations. You get to choose what mindset you take on and what mindset you make your habit. At the end of the day, these are all habits. And some habits are easier to break than others, as we know. So in addition to being able to change those mindsets, if we are, willing to identify them, sort of shine the light on them, and then make some intentional changes and shifts, it can completely shift your exam experience. So I'll give you one final example with regard to that and sort of tie this all together, and then we'll talk about next steps. So with regard to the exam, this is really critical. As in some of the examples I've shared already today, you see how the mindset can impact not only the action that you take and what you do, but it can also impact the experience you have in the situation. So I'll give you a great example. I was working with a client recently. He had struggled for years to pass the exam. He had maybe had success with one or two parts, but had never been able to string all four together. And in particular, he had a really hard time with the financial section of the exam. So he and I started working together, and we were talking about what's different about FAR. First of all, of course, FAR has this reputation out there in the community of being this beastly thing, and there are some things that factually are different. Yes, there's more material on that portion of the exam, but some of the things that people say about that exam really are not true. It's not necessarily harder. Harder is subjective. Maybe harder for you might be easier for someone else who works in financial accounting all the time. So I started to engage him in conversation about what was different, and he said to me, well, my dad, who was a CPA, always told me about how difficult that section of the exam was and how he thought that it was going to be the most difficult part for me. And lo and behold, he had suffered greatly through the financial portion of the exam. In fact, even though he had earned credit on all the other parts before, his inability to pass this one caused him to have exams expire. And it sort of became this self-fulfilling prophecy that someone had said, this is going to be the hardest thing. This is going to be the part that really holds you back. And then in fact, it was. So we had to sort of disengage that story. We had to start to pick apart the different parts of that story and identify what was true and what was made up. What was someone else's experience that had been almost projected onto him. And what he was able to get to eventually was that there really was nothing different about this exam in terms of his approach, and that he needed to use these more empowered mindsets that he had used in other situations on past exams and in other parts of his life to make FAR more accessible. And when he was able to make that shift from this is impossible, this is going to be the thing that holds you back, to this is actually completely within your range. This is absolutely possible for you to pass this exam. Then his whole experience of the whole process shifted. Instead of studying for this test being completely miserable and draining and something that he resisted and in fact would put off and procrastinate on, he was looking forward to sitting down and studying. Instead of being worried about all of the areas where he wasn't an expert and all of these things that he thought were going to be so hard, he was able to go into it with a mindset of being eager and looking forward to becoming an expert in these things that he currently was not an expert in. And all of that made his study sessions go much smoother, made the study sessions more effective, more impactful. He was able to get a whole lot more done in those 2 hours a day than he was getting done previously. So he's more efficient, he's more effective, he's actually absorbing the information, because previously when he would force himself to sit down and learn this content, he's hearing it, right? He's hearing the lecture, he's watching the lecture, he might even be taking notes, but in his mind, what's running through is, this is so hard, this is going to hold you back, there's no way you're ever going to be able to conquer this material. So do you think he was? No, of course not. Not with that mindset, not without shifting that idea. So he's able to make his study sessions more effective, more productive, more enjoyable. He was actually looking forward to studying, and he had let go of this whole idea that this was going to be the thing that held him back. Now, I've not changed anything about his study approach at this point. We've only shifted the mindset. And frankly, I could have left him there and said, go do what you do now. And it completely would have changed his approach. But then we took it a step further. We looked at his study approach. We changed some things there, helped him to be more efficient and effective with what he was actually doing. But the bigger change was the mindset. And he went in and he passed that exam on his first try. I can't emphasize enough how impactful the mindset is when it comes to this exam. If you're going into something thinking this is going to be terrible, this is going to be awful, miserable, awkward, if you walk into a party and you think this is so not my scene, I'm not into this, I don't know anybody here, it's so awkward, you're going to be looking at this party, at this scenario you find yourself in through the lens of how awkward and uncomfortable and how not you this is, how you don't belong here, how you wish you were somewhere else. That we focus on expands. So if that's the thought process that you're going into these exams with, then the likelihood that that's what you see, that's what we have, this sort of confirmation bias. That's what we start to look for in these circumstances. So we look for all the evidence to support our idea that we don't belong here or that this is just so awkward and uncomfortable. We're not looking for the opportunities to have a good time or where we maybe do know some people or have mutual connections or things in common. You almost can't see that if you're so blinded by this mindset that it's going to be terrible, awful, awkward, the worst thing you've ever done. And so my goal with this series is to take these individual ideas and we'll break them down really small. Next week, I think we're going to talk specifically about resistance and exam resistance and how that might be showing up for you. As I said, I'll be bringing on some people to share their stories and their specific examples that hopefully will resonate for you and open up some new possibilities of things where you may feel stuck or like that it is what it is, that there's no other option for you other than to struggle or suffer or keep going the way you're going. And that's my goal, is to help you to shift those mindsets, those internal dialogues that may be either holding you back from producing results or making the process, making the journey miserable for you. Because I really believe that anyone who sets their mind to passing the CPA exam can do it. Is it going to be a challenge? Absolutely. For some people more than others. I mean, that is what it is. I mean, really, that some people are going to struggle with the exam, other people's are not. Maybe it comes more naturally to other people, but I do know that it doesn't have to be a miserable experience. I do know that for everyone, there's a way to fit this exam into your life, to figure out a way that it works for you, to navigate through those challenges and have this be a really valuable learning experience. Not only about the technical content of the exam, but it's an opportunity to learn about yourself, learn about how you approach and react to challenges, how you overcome challenges, and really to learn about other areas where you may be holding yourself back. The beauty of this is, I guess it's the good news and the bad news, is that the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So if you're finding yourself struggling with some aspect of this exam, I would bet you any money that there's another area of your life where that same pattern is holding you back. And so this isn't just an opportunity to have a breakthrough with regard to the CPA exam, but actually an opportunity to have a complete breakthrough in your life and change up everything that's not working for you and all of the places where that mindset might be holding you back. So I'm really excited to do that. I promise I won't do it at 6 p.m. Eastern. You guys are done. You've had a full day. Going forward, these lives are going to be Mondays at 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's 2 o'clock Eastern time. We'll share it also out into an email if you're on our email list, and it'll be reposted to our YouTube channel and our Instagram and everywhere, just to make sure you get access to this. But I hope you enjoyed our day one Mindset Monday, and really looking forward to digging into some topics with you. Also, if you have specific things you want to make sure we address in a Mindset Monday, send us a DM. I would love to address any specific questions that you have, specific challenges you might be struggling with. I'm really looking forward to digging in and having these make a difference for you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. See you next week.